So the core question or the core challenge I think we face is how do we create the conditions as leaders where the people in our organizations really provide the effort, the services, the experience, the knowledge, the abilities that help to foster the health and well-being and the functioning of Northern Ireland as a country. What do we as leaders need to do to create the conditions that are necessary for that? Feel appropriate as a question to address this morning? It's a kind of core question. And I think for me, the core answer to that question is it's about the culture of organizations. It's the way we do things around here. It's the norms of behavior that we nurture within our organizations. It's the water that, if you like, people are swimming in their organizations. It's the values. It's the norms, the almost unconscious assumptions people have about what's the way to behave in this organization. And there are, from looking at all of the research on culture and climate in organizations over the last 60 years, there are three really key influences on culture. The first is the founding values of organizations. What were the founding values? That has a long-term effect, a legacy. The second is the socialization of experiences of people when they join the organization. A week in, for Jill, what does the newcomer experience in terms of the way people do things around here, the way they talk to each other, the way they interact, the values? What is it that people value in this organization? Not what do they say they value, but what's valued in practice. And the third and probably most malleable influence is the leadership of organizations. What do leaders focus on? What do they talk about? What do they reward? What do they pay attention to? Because that tells us what leaders value within the organization. So then the question becomes, so how can we ensure that our leaders are focused on those aspects of culture that will ensure the delivery of high quality performance, good performance, while also ensuring that people who work within these organizations flourish, that they don't languish in these organizations, that they grow, they develop, they're effective, they perform effectively, they're creative, they work well together, they're motivated. How can we ensure that we create these sorts of cultures? And from gathering research evidence, from looking at organizations in different sectors, we have some understanding about what those core cultural elements are. So what are the core cultural elements of organizations that are high performing and that create the conditions for staff to flourish, to develop, to grow, to be effective, to function cooperatively, effectively together? Because if we know what those core elements are, if we know what those core cultural values are, then what that tells us is this is what leaders should be focusing on. This is what leaders should spend their days being really clear about, focusing their efforts on. And the areas that have emerged from research evidence that I and many others have been involved in as being really critical are these 5 areas: prioritizing an inspirational vision and narrative, ensuring effective, efficient performance, great people management, learning, innovation, continuous improvement, team and inter-team working. And this is, in organizations, particularly in public services, is best achieved through collective leadership. So it's these 5 cultural areas, but ensuring that those areas are the areas that are focused on by everybody in the organization, and ensuring that everybody in the organization is taking responsibility for those. So what I'd like to do is talk through each of these cultural elements with you, and then we'll take a pause after each so that we can have some discussion. That feel okay?
Yes.
Sam? So the first is the importance of vision and values and strategy, and it kind of feels like, oh, we're immediately here into a sort of abstract intellectual management speak. But what we've understood from all of the research on people in the workplace over the last 60, 80, 100 years actually, is that it's really important for people to know what their organization is about. What is this work community there for? What is it there to achieve? What's its inspiring purpose? Because we as individuals want to have a sense of our own identity, and part of our identity comes from the key organizations or communities or groups we're part of, and our work organizations play a really important role in that. You know, when somebody asks me when I'm out on a Saturday evening, oh, you know, who do you work for? You know, do I say with pride I work for the King's Fund or Lancaster University, or you know, do I kind of mumble behind my hand about who I work for because I don't feel so proud about the organisation? I work for the civil service. You know, it matters to people that they have a sense of pride about their organisations, and part of that comes from a sense of what this organisation is there for, what its purpose is. And ideally, that will be an inspiring purpose, something that gives people an inspired sense of identity. It's kind of hard if you work for Unipart, or maybe, I don't know, Boots, or, you know, it's hard to kind of find that inspiring purpose. And so I think many organisations struggle. And reflecting on the civil service in Northern Ireland, the opportunity to have a really compelling story about working for the education of people of Northern Ireland, or for justice, or for security, or for health. For each individual department in the civil service, the opportunity to have a really compelling, inspiring vision and story, it seems to me, is very great indeed. But of course, it's really important that that story or that vision, that narrative, is explicit, is understood within the organisation, so that, you know, throughout the organisation people understand what the story is about. Does that make sense so far? Are you with me? People need to know what the organisation is about, what its purpose is, in order that they can see the line of sight between their efforts and the contribution the organisation is making. So, in many, for example, healthcare organisations that I have the privilege of working in, we find that these organisations have a vision statement. And there's often a lovely set of words. One of the pieces of research that we did was to look at the minutes of the meetings of boards of 70 hospitals in England to answer the question, what do these boards talk about? And we looked at the minutes of their meetings over an 18-month period of their meetings. 80,000 pages of the most exhilarating material you can imagine. And we found that in many instances what the boards were talking about, despite having a vision statement around high quality, continually improving and compassionate care, what they were talking about was often the visits of the regulators, productivity issues, cost effectiveness, promoting efficiency. And that where the discrepancy between the vision about high quality care and what they were talking about was greatest, in the annual staff survey, staff reported not feeling that they were supported to deliver the quality of care they wanted to deliver, were less engaged, were less trusting of their leaders. So the point of these compelling strategic narratives or the compelling stories about what our organization exists for, it cannot simply be a set of words. It must be also embodied by the leaders of the organization at every level. So Merseycare, which is a very forward-thinking mental health trust in England, has a story around its vision statements about striving for perfect care. So they want to provide they want to strive for perfect care for service users, for people with mental health problems. And what it means is that it's not enough just to have that as a strapline, that actually it means that leaders in that organization at every level should be thinking every day, what do I need to do to provide the leadership that will enable the people I lead to move closer towards delivering perfect care for people who are depressed, who are anxious, who are suicidal. Or in Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, where they talk a lot about world-class excellence in every area. It means that leaders must be thinking about, what do I need to do to help make sure that we are delivering world-class excellence in my area of the operation and for patients overall? So the first point is it's about having a compelling narrative. This statement here was the mission statement of this organization when it was set up 150 years ago. It happens to be an organization in England, not in the public services, happens to be an organization that comes first or second in terms of levels of staff engagement year on year, and first or second or third year on year in terms of customer service. Anybody know which organization it might be? Not in the public service.
The retail unit.
It's a retail unit?
It's
John Lewis, yeah, John Lewis. But the point is therefore that we need a compelling story that inspires and engages people in our organizations, but that compelling story, it's insufficient. Not only is it insufficient, but it's actually a potential drawback if our leaders don't embody what that story is about. Does that make sense?